Snow fell thick over London in the winter of 1847, but the true cold lived inside the house. Diana Carey held the letter with both hands, even though she already knew every word by heart. 3 lines. Just 3 lines to undo an engagement that had lasted 8 months. Given the recent circumstances involving your family, I consider our engagement at an end. Sincerely, Lord Philip Harcourt. Recent circumstances. Her father buried 6 days ago. The debts uncovered 4 days ago. The scandal splashed across the newspapers 2 days ago, and now this. Diana let the letter slip from her fingers onto the writing desk. She did not cry. Her tears had run dry the morning 2 men in livery appeared at the door, demanding immediate payment of £5,000, a sum she did not have, had never had, and that her father had concealed beneath broad smiles and lavish dinners. A respectable merchant, they had said. A man of vision, they had praised. Lies. All of it built on lies. She rose slowly, her knees unsteady. The room was bitterly cold. The servants had been dismissed 3 days earlier. There was no money for wages, no money for firewood. There had barely been enough to bury the man who had caused all of it. Footsteps on the stairs. Diana turned too quickly, and the world tilted for a moment. Hunger. She had barely eaten since the funeral. Mrs. Albright, the housekeeper who had stayed on despite not being paid, appeared in the doorway. Her usually calm face was drawn tight. "Miss Diana, there is a gentleman here." Diana's stomach clenched. Another creditor. "Tell him I'm not receiving visitors." "He insisted," the housekeeper said, her voice trembling. "It's the Duke of Thornmere." The name cut through Diana like ice. Miles Garrett, the Duke who had destroyed the Brennan family in a land dispute, who had ruined Lord Cosgrove through questionable investments, or so society claimed, though nothing had ever been proven. Who bought properties from desperate widows for half their worth. Treacherous as a serpent, they whispered in the drawing rooms. And now he was here, in her house. Why would he come here? Mrs. Albright only shook her head, eyes wide. Diana smoothed her black dress, the same one she had worn for 4 days now. She had no other clean one. She drew a steadying breath and straightened her spine. She was still a Carey. She still had a name, even if it was in ruins. For now. She descended the stairs at a measured pace, each step echoing through the empty house. The drawing room was dim, curtains drawn, fireplace cold. At its center stood a tall figure, his back to her. He turned as she entered. Diana stopped at the threshold. The Duke of Thornmere was younger than she had imagined, early 30s perhaps. Dark hair neatly combed back, a sharp jaw, eyes that gave nothing away. He wore an immaculate black greatcoat and leather gloves. An elegance that felt almost obscene in the frozen decay of the room. He did not smile. He did not hurry to greet her. He simply looked at her, as though assessing the purchase of a horse. Diana lifted her chin. "Your Grace." "Miss Carey," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I'm sorry for your loss." A polite lie. He was sorry for nothing. "What brings you here, Your Grace?" Miles Garrett took 2 steps forward. Diana forced herself not to retreat. "Business." A deliberate pause. "And a proposal." Something twisted in her stomach. "I have no money to settle my father's debts." "I didn't come to collect." His dark eyes held hers. "I came to offer a solution." Silence. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the cold felt sharper still. "What kind of solution?" He did not blink. "Marriage." The word echoed through the empty room like a gunshot. "I beg your pardon?" "You need financial protection. I need a wife." His voice carried no emotion. "It's a simple transaction." Transaction. Something burned in Diana's chest. Anger, perhaps, or despair. "A transaction." "Yes." She stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Do you believe I'm something to be bought?" For the first time, something crossed his face. Not regret, interest. "I believe you are alone without money, and in 3 weeks' time, you will be turned out of this house." He tilted his head slightly. "I'm offering you a way out." Diana clenched her jaw. "And what do you gain from this?" Miles Garrett smiled. It was not comforting. "That, Miss Carey," he said softly, "we'll discuss if you accept." If you too cherish period stories, those that whisper like old letters and echo like longing hearts, leave your like and subscribe to the Countess's Tales. Your support allows these narratives to cross oceans and reach more souls around the world. And before you go, tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from. It's always enchanting to discover how far our stories travel. Chapter 1. The Proposal. Diana did not answer at once, not because she was considering the offer, the idea was absurd, but because her legs simply refused to obey the command to throw him out. Miles Garrett remained perfectly still, watching her, as if he had all the time in the world. "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. One eyebrow lifted. "Why not you?" "Don't toy with me, Your Grace." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "You're a duke. You could have any woman in London. Why choose someone stained by scandal?" "Perhaps precisely because of that." Diana frowned. "I don't understand." Miles took another step forward. This time she retreated, her back meeting the doorframe. He stopped 3 paces away, yet it felt as though he had claimed the entire room. A wife from proper society would come with expectations, meddling relatives, demands of love. He said the last word as though it were a minor inconvenience. "You have none of that, no family to interfere, no position from which to make demands, and certainly no romantic illusions about me." It was true, and still the cold precision with which he said it made something twist in Diana's stomach. "So I'm convenient." Extremely. She should have been furious. She should have ordered him out, no matter the consequences. But Philip's letter was still upstairs. The eviction notice would come soon, and the cold was no longer just winter. It was the emptiness of the house, the absence of firewood, the constant ache of hunger. "And if I refuse?" Miles gave a small shrug, almost graceful. "You'll refuse. And then, in 2 weeks, perhaps 3, you'll lose this house. You'll look for work as a governess or a companion, if anyone is willing to hire someone with a tarnished name." He paused. "Or you'll find alternatives that are less respectable." Diana clenched her fists. "You're cruel." "I'm honest." He inclined his head slightly. "Would you prefer polite lies? I can offer those as well if they make this easier." "I don't need your lies." "Then accept the truth." Miles stepped aside, gesturing as if offering an exit that wasn't real. "You need me more than I need you, and yet I'm here making an offer many would call generous." "Generous?" Diana nearly laughed. There was nothing generous about it. It was pure calculation. He gained a wife without complications. She gained a roof and a name that still carried weight, a transaction. "How long do I have to decide?" "Until tomorrow at noon." Short. Brutal. "And if I accept?" She forced herself to go on. "What are the terms?" Something shifted in his expression. "Not satisfaction, but close. Immediate marriage, a special license, I can arrange it." He spoke as if listing clauses. "You'll move to my estate in Yorkshire within a week." Yorkshire, far from London, far from everything. "And my obligations?" "Attend social functions when required. Manage the household." A brief pause. "Produce an heir eventually." Heat rushed to Diana's face. He said it as calmly as one might speak of purchasing livestock. "Eventually. I'm in no hurry." Miles stepped back toward the door. "But I expect the agreement to be honored when the time comes." Agreement. Not marriage. An agreement. "And you?" Diana lifted her chin. "What are your obligations?" For the first time he seemed almost amused. "To maintain you, to protect you from creditors, to ensure you never go cold or hungry again." His hand closed around the doorknob. "And to disregard entirely any scandal connected to your father." The words struck her like a blow. He knew. Of course he did. Every debt, every lie, every sordid detail. And he did not care. Or worse, he saw advantage in it. Miles opened the door, Icy air rushed into the room. He paused on the threshold and looked back. "Tomorrow at noon I'll send a carriage. If you're inside it, I'll take that as a yes." He placed his hat on his head. "If not, well, good luck, Miss Carey." And he was gone. Diana remained there alone in the frozen room, listening to his footsteps fade until the front door closed. Silence. Her legs unsteady, she returned to the writing desk and sank heavily into the chair. Her hands trembled, from the cold, from the shock, perhaps from both. Philip's letter was still there. She picked it up again and reread those 3 miserable lines. Given the recent circumstances, Philip, who had sworn he loved her, who had kissed her hand and promised to protect her. He had vanished at the first sign of trouble. And Miles Garrett, the man everyone feared, the one they called a serpent, had offered marriage, not out of love, not out of compassion, but he had offered. Diana let the letter fall, staring at the cold, lifeless hearth. Tomorrow at noon, a carriage, a decision. She closed her eyes as exhaustion finally claimed her. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering London in white, but Diana no longer felt the cold. She felt only the hollow weight of a choice that had never truly been a choice at all. Chapter 2. A marriage without illusions. Miles Garrett left the Carey house, certain she would accept. It wasn't arrogance, it was calculation. He had seen the cold in that room, the dead fireplace, the dress too thin for winter, the letter abandoned on the writing desk, folded and unfolded until the paper nearly tore. Above all, he had seen the desperation in Diana Carey's eyes, carefully masked by pride. She had no choice, and he needed someone exactly like that. The carriage rolled through snow-covered streets, the horses' hooves muffled by the white beneath them. Miles watched London pass by the window, shops closing early, vendors packing away their goods, people hurrying back to warm homes. He did not feel the cold. He never had. "Back to the residence, Your Grace," the driver asked as they paused at a crossing. "No, Lincoln's Inn. I need to see Thornbury." The solicitor. The contract had to be ready before noon the next day. The carriage turned. Miles leaned back against the seat, his fingers tapping lightly against his knee, the only outward sign of tension. Marriage. The word still felt foreign, even after weeks of considering it. It wasn't something he wanted. It never had been. But the Board of Guardians had made their position clear. Without a wife, without a visible, legitimate heir, his authority over the lesser family properties would be questioned. There were distant cousins, always watching, always waiting for weakness. And Miles Garrett did not grant weakness to anyone. He needed a wife, but not just any wife. Not the giggling debutantes his mother had once insisted upon. Not the seasoned widows who offered themselves at balls. Not women who came with expectations, interfering families, or, worse, feelings. Diana Carey was perfect precisely because she was none of those things, ruined, alone, desperate, controllable. The carriage stopped before Thornbury's offices. Miles stepped down and climbed the stairs with purpose. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with paper, ink, and irreversible decisions. Richard Thornbury rose at the sight of him, adjusting his spectacles. "Your Grace, I wasn't expecting you today. I need a marriage contract by tomorrow at noon." Thornbury blinked, clearly taken aback. "Marriage? Are you engaged, Your Grace?" "I will be. Tomorrow." The solicitor sat down slowly. "May I ask to whom?" "Diana Carey." Silence fell at once. Thornbury removed his glasses, cleaning them with nervous care. "Marcus Carey's daughter. The merchant who died leaving debts and scandal, yes. Your Grace, with all due respect, this will provoke comment. She has no position, no dowry, no—" "She has exactly what I require," Miles cut in coolly. "And I didn't ask for your opinion. I asked for a contract." Thornbury swallowed and obeyed. "The usual terms?" "No." Miles stepped closer. "Clear restrictions regarding property. She inherits nothing beyond her allowance. The legitimate heir holds full rights. Include a fidelity clause. Proven infidelity results in the loss of all provisions." The pen moved swiftly across the page. And reciprocal clauses for your grace? Miles gave a brief, humorless smile. No. He had no intention of being unfaithful. The interest simply wasn't there. But the contract would make one thing unmistakably clear: where the power lay. The annual allowance? £500. Thornbury looked up, surprised. That's generous, given her circumstances. I want her properly dressed. I won't have my Duchess looking like a beggar. My Duchess. The words sounded strange even to him. It will be ready tomorrow morning, Thornbury said. I'll send it to the residence. 8 o'clock, not later. Miles left without a farewell. Dusk had settled by the time he returned to the carriage. Winter shortened the days and stretched the nights. Home, Your Grace. Yes. The Mayfair townhouse was brightly lit. Hastings opened the door before Miles reached the steps. Dinner will be served in... I won't be dining. Send something to the library. Miles went straight in, closing the door behind him. He poured himself a brandy and stood by the window, watching the snow fall. Clean. Pure. A visual lie. Everything had filth beneath it, if one looked closely enough. Even him. His reflection in the glass showed a man of 33, duke for 8 years. The neglected heir of a father who had preferred mistresses and bastards to his legitimate family. Philippa had tried to be different. She had tried to bring lightness, affection, something like love. And she had died for it. Fever, treatment delayed. Too much distance between Yorkshire and the nearest physician. Miles tightened his grip on the glass. Never again. Love made people weak, careless, mortal. Diana Carey would not expect love from him, and he would not offer it, a clean transaction. Hastings brought the tray. Miles ate without thought, already arranging the next day in his mind, a brief ceremony, no guests. 1 week in London for clothing and arrangements, then Yorkshire, far from gossip, far from curious eyes, and far from Jasper, the half-brother, the son his father had favoured for years, as if that still mattered. Miles wrote quick instructions to Mrs. Drummond, rooms prepared, a dressmaker engaged, appropriate clothing acquired. Everything had to be flawless. Diana Carey would now carry his name, and the name Garrett tolerated no imperfections. Have the carriage ready tomorrow at noon, he told Hastings. Send it to the Carey house. Has the young lady confirmed, Your Grace? Miles did not hesitate. She will. When he was alone again, the fire in the hearth was already dying. Tomorrow, everything would change. He would have fulfilled his social duty, secured his position, silenced the rumours surrounding the solitary duke, and Diana Carey would have a roof, food, and a name that still meant something. Everyone would benefit. Miles set the empty glass down on the table. There was no romance in it, no illusions, only necessity on both sides, and he had always known how to live with that. Chapter 3. The Duke's House. The carriage travelled through London for nearly 2 hours before it finally stopped. Diana had expected the countryside, muddy roads, bare trees, the first true signs of her separation from the city. Miles had said they would leave for Yorkshire in a week, but when the door opened, it was not the outskirts that awaited her. It was an imposing mansion in Mayfair. His Grace's London residence, miss, the driver said, offering his hand. Diana accepted it, her boots touching clean pavement, carefully cleared of snow. Everything here felt different from the world she had left behind, more orderly, more quietly powerful. The front door opened before she reached the steps. An immaculate butler inclined his head. Miss Carey, His Grace is expecting you in the library, if you would follow me. Diana entered, still clutching her small reticule. The entrance hall was vast, cold marble beneath her feet, crystal chandeliers overhead, and a massive portrait of an ancestral Garrett, watching everything with stern authority. Money, lineage, permanence, everything she no longer possessed. She was led down a long corridor to double oak doors. The butler knocked, waited, then opened them. Miss Carey, Your Grace. The library was immense, shelves rising to the ceiling, a fire burning low, the scent of old wood and accumulated power. Miles stood by the window with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He did not turn at once. You may go, Hastings. The door closed. Silence. Diana remained where she was, suddenly acutely aware of herself, of her plain bag, her dark dress, the sound of her own breathing. When Miles finally turned, she felt the full weight of his gaze. He wore formal attire, perfectly tailored. Here, surrounded by everything that belonged to him, he seemed even more distant, more untouchable. "You came," he said without surprise. "I did." "Good." He crossed to the desk and gathered a stack of papers. "The marriage contract. Read it and sign if you agree to the terms." He held the documents out to her. Diana stepped closer, her fingers unsteady as she took them. 3 pages, legal language. Phrases leapt out even without full understanding. Renunciation of property, annual allowance, legitimate heir, £500 a year. "It's generous," she murmured. "It's appropriate," he corrected. "Sign at the bottom of each page." She dipped the pen into the ink. Her hand hesitated. "And afterward?" "Afterward we marry. Tomorrow at 10. Private chapel. The special license is already secured." The speed of it nearly made her recoil, but she didn't. She signed. 1 page, another. The last. Diana Margaret Carey. Miles gathered the papers without rereading them. "Hastings will show you to your rooms. A dressmaker will arrive this afternoon. For egg tomorrow?" "Yes." He studied her. "You can't be married in mourning." Diana glanced down at her worn black dress. "I don't mind." "I do." His voice allowed no argument. "You'll be representing my name." Appropriate, like a well-kept possession. She nodded. There was no point in fighting that battle. Her rooms were on the 2nd floor, an entire suite, elegant, flawless, and utterly impersonal. "Mrs. Drummond will attend you shortly," Hastings said before withdrawing. Diana sat on the bed, letting her bag slip to the floor. Fine linen sheets, a soft mattress, forgotten luxury. The housekeeper arrived not long after. She assessed Diana with a single professional glance. "I'll prepare you for tomorrow." Nothing in her tone suggested choice. The afternoon passed in measurements, fabrics, decisions Diana never truly made. Madame Colette spoke endlessly. Diana merely nodded. At precisely 7 o'clock she was summoned for dinner. The dining room was smaller than she'd expected, though no less formal. One portrait drew her eye, a fair-haired young woman with sorrowful eyes. Miles rose when Diana entered. "Miss Carey." "Your Grace." They sat. The meal was served. Diana ate slowly, conscious of every movement. Miles ate with methodical precision, silent. She was the one who gestured toward the portrait. "Who is she?" Something crossed his face. "My sister." "Philippa. She was very beautiful." "She was." The word carried weight. "I'm sorry. She died 3 years ago. Fever." He didn't look back at the painting. "She was 19. 19. Do you have other siblings?" "One half-brother, Jasper." His voice hardened. "He lives in Yorkshire." "Are you close?" A short laugh. "He speaks. I tolerate." Miles looked directly at Diana. "He'll try to be friendly with you. Ignore him. I can decide that for myself." "You can." He leaned forward slightly. "But remember, now you carry my name. My name. My concern." "You haven't given me reasons for loyalty yet," Diana replied, holding his gaze. "Only reasons to survive." For a brief instant, something unfamiliar flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. "Tomorrow at 10, he said, returning to his plate. "Don't be late." The dinner ended there. No farewells, no promises. The transaction was proceeding exactly as planned. Chapter 4. The agreement sealed. Miles woke at 6 o'clock, as he always did. The ritual was unchanged. A cold bath, a precise shave, clothes laid out by Hastings the night before. Everything methodical, everything under control. And yet something unfamiliar lingered in the air. Today he would be married. He dressed in his ceremonial coat, dark, impeccably cut, without ornament. This was not a wedding meant to impress. It was a wedding meant to be executed. At precisely 8, Thornbury arrived with the contract. Miles reviewed it quickly, signing at the bottom of each page. His steady hand filled the space beside Diana's name. "The special license is with the Reverend?" he asked, returning the papers. "Yes, Your Grace. Everything is prepared for 10. "Good. You may go." Thornbury hesitated at the door. "Your Grace, I hope this will be a happy marriage." Miles lifted his gaze, impassive. "Happiness wasn't included in the terms of the contract, Thornbury." The solicitor did not press the matter. He left. Miles went down to breakfast at 9. He ate alone, as always, reading correspondence. He opened Jasper's letter, already anticipating its tone. "I've heard rumors in Yorkshire that you're considering marriage." Miles crumpled the paper and tossed it into the fire. Jasper always knew how to provoke him, that casual, almost fraternal tone, as if bastard blood meant nothing. As if their father had never chosen the other son, but it mattered. It always had. At 9:45, Hastings appeared. "Your Grace, Miss Carey is waiting in the hall. Tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes." He needed those moments, not to calm himself, he wasn't nervous, but to reaffirm what this was. Business, strategy, nothing more. He descended the stairs slowly. Diana stood with her back to him, studying the portrait of Garrett's grandfather. She wore an ivory silk gown. Her hair was arranged in intricate braids, small white flowers woven through. She looked appropriate, as though she belonged there. A visual lie, Miles thought. No one belonged anywhere. People merely occupied spaces. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I am." The steadiness of her reply pleased him. "Then let's go." The private chapel was small, old, reserved for the Garrett family for generations. Reverend Caldwell waited at the altar, the same man who had baptized Miles as a child. Miles descended first, offering his hand. Diana took it. Her fingers were cold even through the gloves. There were no guests, only Hastings and Mrs. Drummond as witnesses. The Reverend's words sounded ancient, repeated, predictable. Miles heard them without truly listening. He watched Diana from the corner of his eye, pale, upright, without tears, like someone facing a sentence. "Your Grace," the Reverend prompted. "Your vows." Miles turned fully toward her. "I, Miles Edward Garrett, Duke of Thornmere, take thee to be my lawful wife." The words came automatically. When Diana spoke, her voice trembled only at first. She held his gaze. "Till death do us part." Miles calculated without emotion. 50 years, 60, an entire lifetime. Function, not feeling. The ring was simple, pure gold. He placed it on her finger with more care than necessary, noting the tension in her hand. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared. "You may kiss the bride." Miles hesitated for only an instant. The kiss was brief, proper, without meaning. As he stepped back, something crossed Diana's face. He did not try to name it. They signed the register. Her handwriting was elegant, precise. Better education than he had expected. Interesting. The carriage waited outside. "And now?" Diana asked once they were seated. "We return home. Tomorrow we begin preparations for Yorkshire. So soon. I see no reason to delay." She did not answer. Miles watched her in silence. There were other women in London in similar circumstances, other ruined women, other convenient choices, but none had stood so straight in the face of ruin. Proud. As Philippa would have been, he thought, and immediately pushed the thought away. No, Diana was not Philippa. No one ever would be. They arrived at the mansion. "Welcome to your new home, your ladyship," he said formally. "It doesn't feel real." "It will, eventually." A lie. Nothing ever felt real. In the hall, Hastings announced luncheon. "Dispense with formality," Miles said, removing his gloves. "Send something to my library and to the Duchess's rooms." "We won't dine together?" Diana asked. "I have work." It was true. He always did. He went upstairs without looking back. In the library, he poured himself a brandy despite the hour and watched the snowfall grow heavier. married, obligation fulfilled. So why was there that strange hollow in his chest, as though something had shifted beyond the title? Miles drained the glass in one swallow. Nothing had changed, and he intended to keep it that way. Chapter 5. The Duchess in a Gilded Cage. Diana remained standing in the corridor after Miles disappeared up the stairs. Married, Duchess. The two words sounded like a foreign language, repeated in her mind without ever settling into her body. Mrs. Drummond appeared beside her, discreet as a shadow. "Your ladyship, would you like me to escort you to your rooms?" Your ladyship. No longer Miss, no longer Diana Carey. She nodded. Yes, thank you. She followed the housekeeper up the stairs, her fingers gliding along the polished banister. Everything in that house was too flawless, too beautiful, too cold. Like the man who was now her husband. Husband. The word felt absurd. Miles Garrett was no one's husband. He was a stranger who had signed papers beside her in an empty chapel and kissed her as one stamps a document. The blue rooms felt different now, no longer a guest chamber but a destination. For how long? Years, decades, till death do us part. Diana sat on the bed, and only then, when the silence closed around her like a door, did she allow the full weight of it to fall. She had married the man the drawing rooms called a serpent, a man who had not looked at her as a wife, but as a solution, a man who, on his own wedding day, had chosen work over sharing a table with her. A knock. "Come in." The door opened and a young maid entered with a tray. Red-haired, freckled, hands shaking. She couldn't have been 20. She nearly dropped everything in her hurried curtsy. "Your luncheon, your ladyship." Diana rose at once and caught the tray before it tipped. "Careful." The girl went pale. I'm sorry, I'm new, your ladyship. I didn't—" Diana set the tray down gently on the small table. "It's all right. What's your name?" The maid blinked, as if no one in these walls ever asked. "Mary, your ladyship." "Thank you, Mary." The smile Diana tried to give her came out crooked, as though her face no longer remembered the shape. Mary hurried out. Diana looked at the food. Creamy soup, fresh bread, cheese, fruit. Enough abundance to end a week of hunger. She should have been ravenous, but her stomach was closed, because the hunger suddenly was something else entirely. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Her thoughts returned again and again to the same point. Vows spoken as ritual, a kiss without warmth, the vast distance between that and any notion of union. To have and to hold. Miles did not want to have, and to hold for him meant nothing more than sustaining a body and a surname. An agreement, a signature, a cage lined with silk. Her fork slipped from her fingers and struck the plate. The sound echoed too loudly in the empty room. What had she expected? Love? Affection? It was ridiculous. She had accepted knowing it was a transaction. So why did it hurt? She went to the window. Snow blanketed the gardens, turning everything white, a white that pretended purity, hiding the weight of mud beneath each step. Outside, London went on living. People warmed by other hands, by laughter, by promises. And she was here, locked inside a magnificent house with a husband who did not wish to see her. The afternoon dragged. She tried to read a book from the small shelf, but the words dissolved. She tried to sleep, but her body did not know how to rest without safety. When the light began to fade, Mrs. Drummond appeared again. "Your ladyship, dinner will be at 7. His Grace asked me to inform you that this time you'll be dining together." This time as though correcting a scheduling error. "I understand, thank you." Alone again, Diana had half an hour to put on the dignity that was now required of her. She changed dresses, dark green, long sleeves, heavy fabric. She pinned her hair more loosely. She faced herself in the mirror. A stranger looked back. Elegant, appropriate, impeccable, and empty. She went down at exactly 7. The dining room glowed with candlelight. The table was set for 2 at opposite ends, distant. As if even the polished wood understood that this was not intimacy. It was a boundary. Miles stood by the fireplace. He wore a simpler coat than the one from the morning. When she entered, He turned as one turns a page in a report. "Your ladyship. Your grace." They sat. Servants poured wine, then served soup, this one scented with herbs Diana did not recognize. Silence settled over the room with the ease of something long at home. Diana couldn't bear it. "May I ask something?" Miles lifted his eyes. "You may. Why did you choose me? The real reason, not the one you gave me before." He took a sip, as if the question needed to be swallowed before it could be answered. "You were convenient. There were other ruined women in London, widows, daughters without dowries." Diana leaned forward, steady. "Why me, specifically?" His silence stretched long enough for her to think he wouldn't answer. Then his voice came, low. "Because you didn't beg." Diana blinked. "What?" "In that cold room, alone, without money, without options." He turned the glass slowly. "You didn't cry. You didn't try to persuade me with tears. You didn't try to buy me with sweetness. You simply stood there and asked what I gained." His dark eyes met hers. "As if you still had power." Diana's chest tightened without warning. "I didn't." "No," he agreed calmly. "But you acted as though you did. And that was useful." Useful. Everything always returned to the same place: usefulness, function, calculation. "And now?" Diana held her voice the way one shields a candle from the wind. "What do you expect of me?" "Attend events when necessary. Manage the household. Eventually produce an heir." The words "produce an heir" fell like metal onto porcelain. Diana clenched her fists beneath the table. "And between those events and that eventual heir, what do I do? Sit in empty rooms waiting to be summoned?" For a second something crossed his face. Not irritation, almost surprise, as if he weren't used to being questioned like that. "Do as you please. Read. Sew. Visit." He shrugged. "I don't care." "I don't care." 3 words. 3 blades. Diana lifted her glass and drank more than she meant to. The wine burned, but it didn't warm the place that hurt. "Do you know what's worst?" The sentence escaped before she could stop it. "It's not that you don't love me. I didn't expect that. It's not that you're cold. I already knew that." She set the glass down too hard, the sound ringing out. "It's that you don't care. About anything. You married me today and you can't even pretend it means something." Miles didn't move. Only then did Diana realize what she had done. He was a duke, her husband. It was their first day. She should apologize, withdraw, lower her eyes. But she couldn't. Miles rose slowly. She braced herself for anger. It didn't come. He didn't shout. He didn't humiliate her. He didn't break anything. He simply looked at her for a long moment. "You're right," he said at last, his voice so controlled it sounded painful to hold. "I'm not human in the way you expect. I don't know how to be." He walked to the door and stopped at the threshold. "But I never lied about that. You knew what you were agreeing to." And he left. Diana remained there alone at the long table, surrounded by food she didn't want, candles that gave no warmth, and a silence that spread like mold along a damp wall. Married less than 12 hours. And already she felt lonelier than the day she buried her father. The door opened again. Diana lifted her head quickly, her heart betraying her with foolish hope. It wasn't Miles. It was a servant, clearing plates. "Would your ladyship care for dessert?" Diana shook her head. "No." "Thank you." She went upstairs as one goes into exile. She removed her dress, put on her nightgown, let her hair down and brushed it without thought, as if the motion might impose order on the chaos. She lay in the vast bed and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and Diana, Duchess of Thornmere, closed her eyes, trying not to imagine what the rest of her life would be. An agreement fulfilled. Nothing more. Chapter 6. The man who didn't know how to be Miles did not return to the library. He went straight to his own chambers, on the opposite side of the corridor, far from the blue rooms where Diana slept. He closed the door and turned the key, more out of habit than necessity. He always locked doors, always isolated spaces, always maintained control. "I wish you were human." The words returned, insistent, an echo that refused to fade. He poured himself a brandy and drank, standing by the window. The room lay in shadow, lit only by the low fire in the hearth. It wasn't the first time someone had called him cold, or cruel, or inhuman, but hearing it from her, on their wedding day, after everything he had done to pull her out of ruin, stirred something unfamiliar, something he didn't immediately recognize. Miles tightened his grip on the glass. No, he hadn't saved her. He had made a logical arrangement, convenient, clean. And yet, she was right to say there was no humanity in it. A knock at the door. "Go away," he said without turning. "It's Hastings, Your Grace. An urgent letter has arrived from Yorkshire." Miles opened the door sharply. The butler extended the sealed envelope. The crest was familiar. Jasper. Of course it was. "Thank you, you may go." Hastings hesitated. "If I may, Your Grace." The Duchess appeared unsettled when she went upstairs. Miles fixed him with a cool stare. "And? I only thought you might wish to know." "Now I do." "That will be all." Hastings bowed and withdrew. Miles shut the door and broke the seal. "Miles, I've confirmed the rumors. You've married. Congratulations, I suppose. When do you intend to bring your new Duchess to Yorkshire? The estate remains as you know it. Cold, isolated, bleak. Ideal for your temperament. Less so for a woman unfamiliar with the place. I've prepared the main rooms, but you may need additional staff if appearances are to be maintained. And I'll do my best not to frighten your wife with my inconvenient presence as a bastard. Your brother, whether you like it or not, Jasper Miles, crushed the letter and threw it into the fire. Jasper always knew how to provoke him. That almost cordial tone, the false humility, as if he were the wronged one, when he had been the favored son for years, while Miles, the legitimate heir, learned early how to disappear, while Philippa asked for attention in empty corridors, while their father laughed careless, insisting that solitude built character. 2 years later, Philippa was dead. Fever, pneumonia, a doctor who arrived too late because Yorkshire was far from everything. Far from help, far from care. Miles punched the wall. The dull impact echoed through the silent room. Control. Always control. He drew a steady breath, forcing himself back into the present. Philippa had been dead for 3 years. Diana was not Philippa. She didn't need emotional protection. She needed stability, a name, a roof, and he had given her that. Everything else, affection, warmth, humanity, had never been part of the agreement. He finished the brandy, set the glass aside, and undressed. He lay back, staring into the dark ceiling. "I wish you were human." Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he truly wasn't. He had learned too young that feelings were costly, that loving meant exposure, that caring meant loss. His father had taught him that through neglect. Philippa had taught him through death, and Miles had sworn never to be vulnerable again. If that made him inhuman in Diana's eyes, so be it. Better inhuman than destroyed. He closed his eyes, waiting for sleep. It didn't come. Her image returned, green eyes bright with restrained fury, rigid posture, a voice trembling as she demanded something he didn't know how to give. Humanity. He sank deeper into the pillow. Tomorrow they would begin preparations for Yorkshire, away from London. Away from memory. There everything would be simpler. Diana would adjust, everyone did, and he would remain as he always had been, functional, efficient, whole. Alone, but whole. Morning arrived grey and cold. Miles woke at 6, as always. Bath, shave, clothes. He went down to breakfast at 7. Diana was already there. He paused in the doorway, surprised. He hadn't expected her so early. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loosely pinned. She held her teacup with excessive firmness, her gaze fixed on the snow-covered garden. She didn't turn when he entered. Miles took the seat at the head of the table. A servant poured coffee in silence. The emptiness between them was different from the night before. There was no tension, no anger, only absence. He picked up the newspaper, pretending to read, the words blurred. He was too aware of her presence, of the thick silence settling over the table, Diana spoke first. "When do we leave for Yorkshire?" Miles lowered the paper. "In 3 days. I have a few matters to resolve here." "I understand." She turned back to the window. Miles watched her for a moment, the stiffness in her shoulders, the careful distance even in the smallest movements. He should say something. Explain. Repair. But he had never known how to find the right words when they mattered most. "Use these days to familiarize yourself with the house," he said at last. "The library is at your disposal. The gardens as well, weather permitting." Diana nodded without looking at him. "Thank you." Formal, distant, exactly what he had claimed to want. "So why did it feel wrong?" Miles rose abruptly. "I have engagements this morning. I'll be out until afternoon." "Of course." He left the room before the silence could become unbearable. The carriage was already waiting. "Where to, Your Grace?" the driver asked. Miles hesitated. He had no engagements. He simply needed to escape that house, that table, that woman who, without raising her voice, had exposed something he had spent a lifetime burying. "Just drive," he said. "Anywhere." The carriage moved on. Miles watched London wake. Shops opening, voices filling the streets, children running past. Life in motion, things his house had never known. Not even when Philippa was still alive. And now he was repeating the same silence with Diana, a wife who already despised him on the second day of marriage. Efficient, he thought bitterly. The carriage passed the old Carey house. Dark windows, closed doors. Soon it would be sold, as if she had never existed there. Miles looked away. 3 days until Yorkshire. There things would have to be different, because if this continued, this cold distance, this heavy silence, he wasn't sure how long he could endure it, even though it was exactly the life he had chosen. The irony wasn't lost on him. He leaned his head back against the upholstery and closed his eyes. 3 days. Just 3 days. After that, they would begin again, or at the very least, pretend that they would. Chapter 7. The Bastard and the Mirror. Diana spent the morning wandering the mansion like a ghost. Hastings had offered to give her a full tour, but she declined. She preferred to discover it alone. Each empty room, each silent corridor. The library was immense. 3 walls of books from floor to ceiling, rolling ladders, old volumes scented with dust and leather. It should have been comforting. Diana had always loved to read. But here, surrounded by so much accumulated knowledge, she felt only suffocation. She pulled a book at random. Poetry. "Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds." She snapped it shut. There was no love here to alter. There never had been. She kept walking. A music room with a pianoforte draped in cloth. A formal sitting room that looked as though it had never been used. The smaller dining room, almost intimate, though it was impossible to imagine Miles being intimate with anyone. In the second-floor corridor she stopped before a portrait, the same fair-haired woman from the dining room, Philippa. Diana studied the painting closely. Philippa looked 17. There was softness in her face, hope in her eyes. She wore a pale dress, flowers woven into her hair. Everything about her spoke of youth, of life, the opposite of Miles. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Diana turned at once. A man leaned against a doorway at the far end of the hall. Tall, light brown hair left untidy, an easy smile. He wore riding clothes, boots still stained with mud. Not a servant. "Who are you?" Diana asked, instinctively guarded. He pushed away from the wall and came closer. "Jasper Garrett, the inconvenient brother." He bowed with exaggerated flourish. "And you must be the new Duchess my dear brother decided not to mention until yesterday." Jasper. The half-brother. The bastard Miles had told her to ignore. Diana straightened. "Duchess of Thornmere." "Oh, formalities." His smile widened. "Miles thrives on them. Formality, distance, emotional misery." Jasper looked again at the portrait, his smile fading. She was kind and bright. Everything Miles doesn't know how to be. He turned to Diana. But he loved her. In his crooked way, but he loved her. Diana didn't know why those words affected her. "Why are you here?" she asked, changing direction. "I came to confirm the rumors." He inclined his head. "And to warn you. Yorkshire isn't London. It's isolated, cold. The house is far too large for anyone who feels alone." He paused. "If you ever need someone who at least pretends at humanity, I'll be nearby." The words echoed. "I wish you were human." "Thank you," Diana said, her voice carefully measured. "But I know how to take care of myself." "I don't doubt it." Jasper began to step away. "Just don't let Miles convince you that coldness is strength. Sometimes it's just fear dressed well." And then he was gone. Diana stood before the portrait a moment longer. Had Miles been capable of loving someone, or had that humanity died with Philippa? She moved on, found the main bedchamber. The door stood ajar. She entered. The room was excessively functional. A dark bed, a desk covered in papers, technical books, no personal objects, no trace of comfort, like sleeping inside an office. On the desk lay an unfinished letter. "Jasper, regarding the repairs in the north wing." Nothing more. Diana stepped back at once. She didn't want to know more. It wasn't her concern, or it was far too much her concern. She returned to her own rooms and sat by the window. Snow was falling again. 3 days until Yorkshire. 3 days in a house where everything was too large, too silent, too empty. At 5, Mary appeared. "Your ladyship, His Grace has returned. He asks that you join him in the library before dinner." Diana drew a steady breath. The library was warm. Miles stood by the window, as always. "Your ladyship." "Your Grace." "Jasper was here," he said. "You spoke." "Yes." "And what did he say?" "That Yorkshire is isolated, and that he offered friendship." Miles gave a short laugh. "Jasper isn't to be trusted." "And are you?" Diana asked before she could stop herself. "You barely speak to me. You disappear all day. You avoid your own house." Silence fell, heavy. "I needed to think," he said at last. "Think about how to avoid me." Miles rose abruptly. "Think about how to make this work." The words echoed between them. He turned his back. "I don't know how to—" The sentence died unfinished. "I don't know how to make this feel real." Diana felt her heart tighten. "It doesn't have to feel real," she said carefully. "It just doesn't have to be hostile." He turned back slowly. "I'll try. In Yorkshire. To be less absent." It wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning. "I'll try too," Diana replied. "To do what?" "Not to hate you completely." For an instant, too brief to be certain, something like a smile crossed Miles's face, and for reasons she didn't quite understand, that was enough to make the emptiness feel a little less heavy. Chapter 8. The only living thing. Diana woke without knowing what day it was. Not that it mattered. At Thornmere, days bled into one another, grey, cold, indistinguishable. Wake, dress, breakfast alone, empty corridors, lunch alone, books. A silent dinner with a husband who barely saw her. Then repeat. She went to the window. Outside, the fields stretched as far as the eye could see. Dirty snow, stone, a colourless sky. Not a single tree to break the monotony. No sign of life. A beautiful prison, she thought. Still a prison. A knock. "Come in." The maid, no longer Mary, another one, older, always silent, entered with the breakfast tray. "Good morning, your ladyship." "Good morning." The tray was set down, a curtsy given, and the door closed. Efficient, swift, without a word more, like everyone in that house. Diana ate without hunger. Lukewarm tea, dry toast, jam without flavour. Or perhaps she had forgotten how flavour worked. She dressed alone and went down to the library. It was the only place that didn't judge her or ignore her. Books simply existed. Patient. They had been there before her and would remain after. She pulled down a volume of poetry and opened it at random. "Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea." She shut it sharply. Even poetry seemed to conspire against her. She went to the library window. From there she could see the stables. Jasper was there laughing with a groom as though the house behind him were not a mausoleum. Jasper, the only living thing at Thornmere. Miles had said, "Ignore him." But Miles had not spoken to her in days, not beyond that empty courtesy, that polite silence that hurt more than shouting. What right did he have to decide who she was allowed to breathe with? Diana took a shawl, went downstairs, and slipped out the side door. The cold struck like a blade. She wrapped the fabric tightly around herself and walked toward the stables, the wind biting her cheeks. Jasper saw her coming and broke into a grin. "Your Grace! Finally escaped the tower." "I was beginning to think Miles had locked you up there." Diana stopped near the entrance, grateful for the partial shelter. "I needed air." "Air?" He gestured toward the empty fields. "We've got plenty of that, and monotony, and cutting wind." He tilted his head. "How are you settling in?" Diana hesitated. She could lie. Say she was fine, keep the mask. But she was so tired of masks. "I'm not," she admitted softly. "Settling in." Jasper nodded as if the truth had been written on her face all along. "Miles has a rare talent. He turns any place into misery." He motioned inside. "Come, the horses are the only decent things on this estate, aside from me, of course." Diana stepped in. The relative warmth was a relief. The smell of hay, leather, and living animals. Sound, breath, movement, life. Jasper stopped beside a brown mare with white markings. Athena, temperamental, stubborn. "Refuses to obey." He glanced at Diana, a crooked smile playing at his mouth. "Miles hates her naturally. I adore her for it." Diana reached out, touching the soft muzzle. The mare snorted gently. "She's beautiful. And clever. She knows when someone wants to break her." Jasper took an apple and offered it. "Much like you, I imagine." Diana looked at him, wary. "What do you mean by that?" "That you're not the sort who's easily controlled." He leaned against the stall door. "Which must be torture, being trapped here with a man who controls everything except himself." Diana didn't answer at once. Admitting it felt dangerous. Denying it felt pointless. "Miles warned me you like to interfere." Jasper laughed. "He's not wrong. Interfering is my gift, especially when I see someone drowning." His smile faded. "And you're drowning, Duchess. It's in your eyes." Diana turned her face away, pretending interest in another horse. "I'm fine." A poorly told lie. Jasper stepped a little closer without crowding her. "How long has it been since you had a real conversation?" "Days. A week." Diana stayed silent, because it was more than a week, nearly 2 weeks of empty corridors, 2 weeks of silent dinners, 2 weeks of disappearing. "He used to be different," Jasper said quietly, "before Philippa died. Still severe. But there were moments. Rare but real." He looked up toward the rafters, as if speaking to a past that wouldn't answer. "After that, something in him died too, and he decided it was safer not to feel anything." Diana felt her chest tighten. "Why are you telling me this?" Jasper turned to her direct. "Because someone should, and because you deserve to know it isn't your fault. That coldness, that distance, it's his. It always has been." His voice softened. "You just had the misfortune of landing in the middle of it." Diana blinked rapidly, as if she could force the moisture from her eyes by will alone. "I don't know how much longer I can endure this." "Then don't endure it alone." Jasper touched her arm lightly, brief, careful. "Talk to me, complain, shout, cry, anything, except vanish inside that house the way he wants you to." Diana looked at him for a long moment. His kindness felt almost dangerous, because it was real. Miles would have called it manipulation, but right then Diana could think of only one thing: someone finally sees me. "Thank you," she whispered. Jasper smiled, and this time there was no mockery in it. "Come whenever you like. The horses are better company than my brother, I promise." Diana almost laughed. Almost. When she returned to the house, the cold still clung to her, but something inside her had shifted, small, fragile, but alive. She was not entirely alone. That night, Miles noticed, Diana came to dinner changed. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't peace, it was resistance. An inner axis straightened. Miles watched her sit and begin to eat without looking at him. Usually she tried. Some question, some bridge. Tonight, nothing. He drank wine, unsettled without knowing why. "Did you do something today?" he asked, breaking the silence. Diana looked up, surprised. "I visited the stables." Something in him went alert. "The stables. Jasper showed me the horses." She cut her meat calmly. "Athena is beautiful." "Jasper." Miles set his fork down. "I warned you about Jasper." "You did." Diana met his gaze directly, and there was no fear in her eyes. "But Jasper at least speaks to me, which is more than I can say of you." Anger rose, less at her than at the sudden sense of losing control. Jasper inside the house. Jasper touching what Miles did not touch. He always has an agenda. "Perhaps," Diana sipped her wine unhurried, "but he at least pretends I matter, and that's already something." Miles clenched his fists beneath the table. "I'm trying to protect you." Diana leaned forward slightly. "From what? From having someone to talk to?" Her voice cut low and precise. "Or are you just protecting yourself from having to truly see me?" The question struck too deep. Miles rose abruptly. "I'm finished." "Good night, your ladyship." "Of course." Her tone came sharp without raising her voice. "Run. It's what you do best." Miles stopped with his hand on the door. He should turn around, say something, explain. But the words didn't come. They never did. He left and closed the door behind him. In the corridor, he leaned against the cold stone and closed his eyes. Diana was right. He ran. Always had. From emotion, from closeness, from anything that threatened the armor he had built to survive. But now she had Jasper, and Jasper didn't run from anything. Jasper embraced chaos, life, conversation, everything Miles avoided. And Diana, starving for humanity, would naturally gravitate toward that. Miles opened his eyes, jaw tight. He needed to do something, needed to change, open himself. He didn't know how. But if he did nothing, he would lose Diana. Not to Jasper as a lover, no. Jasper wasn't suicidal, but he would lose her respect, the thin loyalty. The chance to make that marriage exist as something more than ink on paper. And for the first time since Philippa's death, Miles felt fear. Not of loss, but of the emptiness that would come after. And of the realization that, this time, he might not survive it. Chapter 9. The armor cracks. Miles didn't sleep. He spent the entire night in the armchair by the bedroom fire, watching the flames shrink until there were only embers left. False warmth, insufficient, like everything he ever offered. The silence in the corridor hurt more than the wind outside. And still he preferred silence, and because silence demanded nothing of him. "Run. It's what you do best." Diana's words returned like a blow that left no bruise, only internal damage. True, cruel, because it was true. By the time the first pale light thinned the windows, Miles was already dressed. He didn't summon Hastings. He didn't follow the meticulous routine that kept him intact. He simply went downstairs, ignored breakfast and locked himself in his study like a man returning to an old habit, hiding behind papers so he wouldn't have to face people. But for the first time in years, numbers made no sense. Letters on contracts blurred. He read the same line 3 times and retained nothing, because his mind kept returning to the dining room, to the way Diana had looked at him, not with anger, not with hope, but with resignation. Resignation was worse. Anger was something he knew how to manage. Anger was fire, violent, predictable, containable if he shut the right doors. But resignation was the absence of flame. Tomb cold, someone who stopped trying to exist near him, and the thought terrified him. A knock at the door. "Go away," he said by reflex, as if the world obeyed simply because he spoke. The door opened anyway. Jasper stepped in and shut it behind him. There was no smile this time. "We need to talk." Miles didn't lift his eyes from the papers he pretended to read. "I'm busy." "You're not." Jasper came to the desk, and the lack of deference was, for some reason, a greater insult than any insult he could have spoken. "You're pretending to be busy because you don't know how to handle the fact that your wife is miserable." Miles looked up, and coldness came easily. It always did. "My marriage is none of your concern. It becomes my concern when she shows up at the stables looking like a ghost." Jasper braced his hands on the desk and leaned in. "What are you doing to her, Miles? Trying to kill her with loneliness?" The chair scraped as Miles rose sharply. "Get out now." "No." Jasper didn't move. "Because someone needs to tell you the truth, and there's no one else in this house who dares. Diana is a person. And you're destroying her. I'm giving her everything she needs." "You're not." Jasper's voice rose, and the sound seemed to break something in the air. "You're giving her food and shelter, as if she were an animal under your care. But she needs more than that. And you know it." Miles clenched his fists, blood pounding behind his temples. "I didn't ask for your opinion. And I didn't ask your permission to give it." Jasper straightened, his anger not fading, only sharpening. "You brought her here, you married her. You ripped her out of everything she knew and dropped her into this frozen tomb. And now you act as if she doesn't exist. I don't—" "You do exactly that," Jasper cut in. "And you know what's worst? She's still trying. She still comes down to dinner. She still asks questions. She still looks at you like there might be something human under that ridiculous armor." He pointed without mercy. "How long do you think that will last? How long before she gives up completely?" Miles went still, because Jasper was right, and because Miles had already watched someone disappear in that house, slowly, like a light smothered by curtains drawn too thick. His voice came out rough, as if it had been trapped for years inside him. "I don't know how." Jasper stared at him, and for the first time the anger seemed to give way to something more tired. "Then learn." Miles swallowed hard, shame turning physical. "I don't know how to be what she needs." Jasper drew a slow breath as if restraining the urge to break something. "If you don't learn, you'll wake up one day and realize she's become as empty as this house." He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the knob. "And this time, Miles, you won't be able to blame God, fate, the winter, anything. It'll be you. Your choice. Your fault." The door closed. Miles stood there shaking. Anger, fear, something he couldn't name because naming meant admitting. He walked to the window and looked out over the pale fields, the dirty snow, the colorless sky. Guilt. The word carried Philippa's weight. How it had been his fault he hadn't insisted she remain longer in London, where there were doctors. How it had been his fault he hadn't noticed sooner. How it had been his fault he'd chosen work over the quiet plea of a girl who only wanted not to feel alone on that estate. And now, Diana, beginning to fade the same way. He shut his eyes, breathing ragged. He had spent years building a fortress inside his chest, so he would never feel that again. So he would never care enough for it to hurt. So he would never truly lose anyone. And it hurt anyway. Because she was disappearing, and he was responsible. His legs gave out. Miles slid down the wall to the cold floor. His hands shook, his chest burned. There were no tears, he had forgotten how to cry. But something in him broke all the same, the armor cracking. And in the middle of that silent ruin, the truth arrived, simple and terrifying. He cared about Diana, not as duty, not as contract, not as my duchess in front of strangers, but truly. And he was destroying her precisely because he didn't know how to show it. When he finally stood again, the fire in the study had died. The whole house felt larger, emptier, as if it had expanded to swallow him. Miles stared at the door. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew that staying still meant repeating the story, and this time he could not bear being the man who let another woman die for lack of humanity. He drew a breath, he opened the door, and he went to find her. Diana was in the library, as always, seated by the window, a book resting in her lap, open, unread. She stared out as if waiting for the horizon to say something the house never said. Miles stopped in the doorway and watched her. She looked thinner. He felt it like a bruise. The dress hung at her shoulders. Shadows lived in her face that hadn't been there before, and for a moment he was afraid Jasper had been too right, afraid she had already stopped trying. He stepped inside and closed the door carefully, as if noise might break her. Diana turned, startled. Formality came by reflex. "Your Grace." Distant, polite, as if he were a visitor. Miles moved closer until he was a few steps away. He didn't dare come nearer. He still didn't know how. "We need to talk." Diana closed the book slowly. "About what?" The words lodged in his throat, humiliating him. Miles, who could command men and estates, could not command his own voice. But he had already decided. Either he spoke or he lost her. "About how badly I'm failing you." Diana blinked, and for an instant her face opened into silent shock, as if she had never expected truth from him. Miles went on before fear could pull him back. "You were right. I run, I avoid. I built this fortress around myself and demand the world adapt." He dragged a hand through his hair, undoing the usual order, and that small act felt indecently human. "And in the process, I'm killing you." Slowly. The word killing hung in the air, far too heavy. "Like I killed—" His voice faltered. Diana rose carefully, as if afraid to startle him. "Killed who?" Miles turned his face away, unable to look at her when he said it. "Philippa, my sister." The confession sounded torn from bone. "She died here, alone essentially, because I was too busy, too cold, to notice she needed more than a roof." The sentences came fast now, years of guilt spilling without control. "By the time I saw it, it was too late, and I swore I would never let anyone close enough for me to feel that again." Silence. Miles heard Diana's footsteps, soft on the thick carpet. She came close enough that he could no longer pretend she wasn't there. "Look at me." He turned. Diana stood in front of him, green eyes fixed on his, and there was no anger there. There was steadiness, and something that looked like understanding, dangerous, because understanding builds bridges. "You didn't kill her," Diana said with the certainty of someone refusing an injustice. "Fever killed her, distance killed her, neglect, perhaps, but not you alone." Miles swallowed the knot in his throat. "I could have done more. I should have—" "And I could have refused your proposal," Diana interrupted, not cruelly, simply truth. "But I didn't. And now we're here, two prisoners of the same winter, each defending ourselves the only way we know." She drew a breath. "Your way only destroys more." Something loosened in Miles's chest, as if an invisible hand eased a knot. "I don't know how," he admitted, and his voice broke again. "How to be human, how to be a husband, how to be anything besides this." Diana reached out and touched his arm, the first voluntary touch since the chapel. Miles went still, as if his body didn't know how to receive it. "Then learn," she said softly, firm. "With me. Slowly. But learn." "Because I can't survive like this." Her eyes shone wet, but she didn't retreat. "And I don't think you can either." Miles stared at her hand, small and pale, and suddenly it seemed braver than anything he had ever done. "I don't know if I can." "Try." Two simple words, impossible words. Miles covered her hand with his, feeling the warmth. Real warmth. The warmth he had avoided for years, as if it were danger. "I'll try," he whispered. "I can't promise I'll succeed. But I'll try." Diana nodded, and the hope in her eyes was so fragile it hurt simply to witness it. "That's all I'm asking." They stayed like that for a moment, connected in a delicate, uncertain, honest way. And Miles realized, with terrifying clarity, sometimes what destroys isn't hatred, it's absence, and he had left too much absence in the world. The next morning Diana went down to breakfast as usual, expecting the familiar. An empty room, tea served by silent hands, and that solitude that was beginning to feel like routine. But Miles was there, not at the distant head of the table. In the chair beside the one she usually chose, as if he had selected presence over power. He was reading correspondence, yes, but he was there. Diana paused in the doorway without meaning to. Miles looked up. Good morning. 2 words. Simple. As if he were learning to speak a new language. Good morning, she replied, sitting carefully. The servant poured tea. Miles returned to the papers, but the silence was different now. Not heavy, cautious, almost respectful. Diana held the cup with both hands, feeling its warmth. Did you sleep? She asked before she could think better of it. Miles hesitated. Then, honestly, not much. That small truth warmed something in her chest. Neither did I. He looked at her, truly looked for a moment, as if registering the sentence, as if it carried weight. I'm sorry. Diana nodded. I know. They finished breakfast without the feeling of an abyss between them, and when they were done, Miles stood with a rare kind of hesitation, like a man who doesn't know whether he should step forward or apologize for existing. There's something I'd like to show you, if you'd like. Diana lifted her eyes. Show me? Outside. The garden, or what's left of them. It was an awkward offer, a small one, but it was him trying. Diana rose. I'd like that. Yes. And for the first time since arriving at Thornmere, she walked beside him without feeling as though she were crossing the house of a stranger. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning was the only way to survive the winter. Epilogue. Roses at Thornmere Spring arrived at Thornmere like an eruption held back for far too many years. Diana knelt beside the restored flowerbed, her hands dark with soil, watching the first roses unfurl like little secrets, white and blush peach. Not the red ones Miles's mother once grew. These were new. A beginning that didn't imitate ghosts. 3 months since the kiss in the corridor. 3 months of slow change, stumbles and retreats, quiet steps forward so small only the people living them could see. But they were real steps, the kind that didn't need announcing in order to exist. You're filthy up to your elbows. Diana lifted her head. Miles stood at the garden's edge, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly wind-tossed. There was a youth to him that had nothing to do with age, only the absence of rigidity. Less duke, more man. I'm planting life. Dirt is inevitable. She rose, wiping her hands on her apron. Have you come to help or only to criticize? His mouth curved into that small smile Diana had learned to coax from him, the way one learns to coax flame from kindling with the right breath. I came to fetch you. Sanders said you've been out here since dawn. The roses need attention. So do I. The words came awkwardly, as if pulled from a place that still hurt to open, but they were true, and truth, from Miles, carried a weight Diana rarely found in anyone else. Warmth climbed through her chest, not the impulsive heat of first infatuation, but something rarer, the warmth of someone who chooses to stay. Then perhaps you ought to plant yourself beside me more often, she teased. Perhaps I should. And to her surprise, her pride really, Miles knelt beside her and picked up the spade. What do I do? Diana showed him, hiding her smile. 3 months earlier, he never would have allowed this, hands in the dirt for something as impractical as flowers. But Thornmere was being reborn, and so was Miles. They worked in a comfortable silence so different from the old silence that crushed. This one warmed. This one had company inside it. Jasper appeared after a while, leaning against the garden wall as if he'd belonged there all his life. Well, well, the great Duke with soil under his nails. Philippa would be laughing until she cried. Miles didn't take the bait. He didn't raise the wall. He only looked at his half-brother with a calm that once would have been impossible. She would. His voice was gentle. And she'd probably join us. Jasper blinked, caught off guard, as if he'd expected venom and received humanity. Diana hid her smile. The two of them were still a rope with old knots, but Miles had tried occasional dinners, conversations less hostile, a patience that was slowly becoming more than mere tolerance. I came to say you've got visitors, Jasper said, recovering his lighter tone. Lord and Lady Ashby, They want to meet the famous Duchess who turned Thornmere's bear into a human being. Diana laughed. Miles rolled his eyes. But there was amusement there, and that alone felt like a miracle. Tell them we'll join them shortly. Jasper left, still shaking his head as though he didn't quite believe the scene he'd witnessed. Miles helped Diana to her feet and brushed a streak of dirt from her cheek with his thumb. So intimate it still felt new, though it no longer felt strange. Bear, he asked. I prefer serpent. It's more mysterious. Miles leaned in and kissed her softly, unhurried, as if he'd discovered kisses could be shelter. I prefer Miles. Diana touched his face, smiling. So do I. Night came in gently, almost kind. After the Ashbys left, impressed by the gardens, by the Duchess who lit the house from within, and by the Duke who, yes, smiled for real, Miles and Diana were alone in the library. Diana read by the fire. Miles worked at the desk, but now and then he looked up as if confirming she was still there, as if her presence was something he still feared he might lose with a blink. Come here, he said suddenly. Diana marked her page and walked to him. Miles pulled her onto his lap, a recent habit that still left him faintly bewildered. Intimacy wasn't natural to him, but he no longer ran from it. He learned. Diana rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his breath slow, as if his body had finally understood what his mind had always feared. Safety. Thank you, Miles whispered. For what? He hesitated, as if choosing the sentence meant choosing a risk. For staying. For not giving up. For teaching me how to live again. Diana lifted her face to look at him closely. You taught me too. I taught you what? How to be miserable? Diana gave a soft, brief laugh and shook her head, touching his cheek with steady affection. You taught me that strength isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of it. You were afraid to feel, afraid to connect. And you did it anyway. Miles held her hand against his face, as if he needed proof it was real. I'm still afraid, he confessed. Every day I wake up thinking I might ruin it, that I might become that cold man again. But you don't. Diana laced her fingers with his. Because now you know you're not alone. I'm here. Miles pulled her closer, and the embrace came strong. Not with the old hesitation, but with something new and nearly fierce. I love you, he said into her hair, voice low, as if the word was still too large. I know I should have said it sooner. I know I should be different. But I love you. Since that corridor with the crocuses, maybe before, I don't know when it began. I only know it's true. Tears burned in Diana's eyes without shame, and she held him tighter. I love you too. And there, in the warmth of the library, two people who began as a transaction understood what winter had never allowed. Some lives aren't saved with money. They're saved with presence. 2 years later, Diana was in the same garden, now lush and bright, spilling with roses that seemed to have learned how to breathe. A child with dark hair and green eyes ran between the beds, laughing as Jasper pretended to chase him. Careful, Thomas. The roses, Diana called, but she was laughing too. Miles appeared beside her with their younger child in his arms, a little girl with light brown hair and dark, serious eyes, as if she were already judging the world with the same calm as her father. Philippa is trying to eat dirt again, he said, and there was humor in his voice. Diana took the baby and wiped her mouth with her thumb, smiling. Like mother, like daughter. Miles watched as Jasper finally caught Thomas and lifted him into the air until the boy burst into laughter, so loud it seemed to fill the whole house. Thornmere, which once only echoed footsteps, now echoed life. Philippa would have loved this, Miles said softly. Seeing the house full again. Diana touched his arm. She's seeing it. Somehow. Miles looked at his wife, the woman who had saved him when he didn't even know he needed saving, and then at their children, at the roses, at stone paths now free of cracks, at a house that finally held noise. Did you ever believe it? He asked. That first day in that frozen room in London. Did you believe we'd end up here? Diana considered, watching Jasper point out clouds to Thomas as if they were secret maps. No, she admitted. I thought it would be a life of gilded loneliness. And now, Diana looked at Miles, at the man who had learned to smile, to hold, to stay. Now I know the best beginnings are sometimes the hardest, and that serpents can shed their skin. She smiled. Especially when they finally have a reason. Miles kissed her, soft and long, while little Philippa, wedged between them, tried to push their faces apart, as if she wanted to be part of that world too. When they pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you for being my reason." Diana held his face with one hand, their daughter with the other. Always. And there, in that reborn garden, in that house that had learned to breathe again, in that improbable family, the treacherous Duke of Thornmere was finally home. Not because he had inherited stone, titles and land, but because he had chosen to love, and had been loved in return. And so Thornmere found its spring. If this story touched you, if Diana and Miles stayed with you even after the final page, tell me in the comments below. I would truly love to know what you felt. Don't forget to leave a like if this story warmed your heart, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next tale of love, loss, and quiet hope. Until our next story, may your nights be gentle, and may love always find its way back to you.